we've got the hearing on Wednesday. Can we talk a little bit about what you're hoping to see? What are your thoughts on this proposal, and what do you hope will happen on Wednesday?
Well, on Wednesday, we're hoping that we have a few thousand individuals show up at the Capitol to show their support for maintaining the religious protections that we have, not only in this state, but in this country. And so a number of individuals will be testifying in front of the Public Health Committee. There will be quite a few outside with signs and protest. We will have a speaker system and really garnering support for the fact that the Connecticut state legislators are overstepping their jurisdiction with regard to mandating medical intervention in the Connecticut community. That's not their job. That is the job of a physician and his or her patient. And in the state of Connecticut, we have two things that protect us with our ability to practice our religion and our medical freedoms, as well as our children have a protection with the ability to go to school. The Constitution of the United States gives us the freedom to practice our religion the way that we see fit as an individual, not just in an organized fashion. The Connecticut State Constitution upholds that right. And even further, the Constitution of the state of Connecticut offers the right for every child to have a free public education. So if they're going to start mandating requirements as to what you can and cannot practice as part of your religious beliefs as an individual, and start mandating what you can and can't do in order to be allowed to go to school, then they are significantly overstepping their boundaries. And this is all in the wake of no outbreaks, no concern for contamination or contagions. This is really unwarranted.
And just to play the other side, what if they're being proactive? What if they're saying, we saw this in New York or we saw this in California, and we want to protect that from happening here and protect children? What would you say to that?
Well, what I would say is we are protecting our children. I challenge our legislators to sit down and read every manufacturer's insert. Every single vaccine manufacturer's insert has sections 6.1 and 6.2, which are adverse reactions. And if there is a risk, there's got to be a choice on the part of the parents. The DTaP vaccine alone lists a side effect of SIDS. It's right there in black and white. So God forbid a family should have a child who has the DTaP vaccine and happens to suffer with SIDS and they pass away. Shouldn't those parents have the right to decide whether their second child should be required to walk through that same fire? So as a parent, our job is to protect our children first. It's to protect our children first. And I'm not telling somebody else how to practice their belief system, but the state really shouldn't tell us how to practice ours.
So they would get rid of the religious exemption, but still allow a medical exemption
for now.
And that was going to be my question. What is your fear of moving forward if this does pass?
Well, if we follow some of what has happened, there are a number of pharmaceutical manufacturers that have recently gotten into the vaccine manufacturing realm and have donated to the campaigns of senators in, say, California, where this all started. It took California 1 year to take the religious exemption away and then remove the medical exemption. The ability of a physician in California no longer involves the ability to determine whether or not a child should or should not be vaccinated based on risk factors. That is now up to the state. And so our fear is that the legislative creep process of we're going to get this part instituted and then we're going to very slowly, drip by drip, take away the other portions.
And then, so what do what do you hope to come out of Wednesday? Cause Wednesday's a hearing, so
Wednesday's a hearing.
there's gonna be a lot of testimony. What do you hope to have come out of that?
Well, we don't know when they're gonna call a vote on this. Our hope is to be able to make the members of the Public Health Committee see that this is not a bunch of individuals who are not educated. This is a significant breach on our rights as a citizen of Connecticut as well as a citizen of the United States. And to make them think long and hard, especially in an election year, if they want to sign their name to a bill that has the responsibility of removing up to 7,000 children from school.
Mm-hmm. And that's about how many kids are unvaccinated in Connecticut?
That have some sort of an exemption to vaccines, yeah, or a religious exemption to some, if not all, of the vaccines.
And so your position is that people should have a choice. Do you personally have an opposition to any of the specific vaccines, or is your position that you want people to have a choice?
I want people to have a choice. I'm not going to tell somebody that they should or should not vaccinate their child. What I'm going to tell them to do is that they need to educate themselves. And the best way to educate themselves, they can go into a lot of research and study epidemiologic studies. They can do research into some of the independent studies that have been done, not the ones done by Merck and Sanofi who are getting paid to sell a product, but the ones that are done by independent laboratories. And if parents choose to go to that level, I would be more than willing to help them find that research so that they can make an educated decision. But it really is quite simple. If we just read the package inserts, it shows the ingredient lists. It talks about the aluminum that's in vaccines, the formaldehyde that's in vaccines, the antifreeze that's in vaccines, how these components, these adjuvants, are there to weaken the vaccine itself, but they trigger a stronger immune response while crossing the blood-brain barrier. And aluminum accumulates and accumulates and accumulates. And this is where 1, 2, 3, 10 dosages starts to become a real problem. When I was a child, the CDC recommended schedule for vaccination was about 8 different vaccines in something like 20 dosages, it might maybe 16 dosages. Today's schedule requires 72 dosages. 72 dosages by the time a child is 18 years old, and that doesn't include the flu or HPV. So when we add that to it, not to mention the fact that there's an estimated 271 different vaccines that manufacturers are working on, market testing, and in the pipeline. So let's say that we're okay and we're comfortable with the vaccines that are on the market today. If religious exemption, if medical exemption is removed, it gives a carte blanche, and doctors won't even have the ability to discuss with their patients that they should not have this vaccine for reasons of potential reaction. There's currently, I believe, 3 reasons why any patient can have a medical exemption. Only 3. One is that they are immunocompromised, HIV. 2, they had a witnessed anaphylactic reaction immediately following the administration of the vaccine, which means in office, not 2 hours later, not in the parking lot. And 3 is that they have cancer. That is the only way currently that somebody can get a medical exemption. Again, if a family loses a child based on a reaction to a vaccine, how is that family going to feel being forced to vaccinate another child? Or if I have a reaction, or somebody has a reaction to the MMR, what happens at the next time they need their booster? Because as we know, vaccines wear off. They do not create immunity. They're not immunizations, they're inoculations. The only way to truly establish immunity is to come down with a disease and have the body go through the immune process. That creates an immunity for life. That's why this is called an artificial immunity when we offer a vaccine.
And what about those diseases that have all but been, wiped from population, and then, you start to see them come back. A lot of that could be attributed to the vaccines and the inoculation. What are your thoughts on the potential to start seeing that come again if we go down the line of having people not vaccinate?
It's a great question. It's one that I've been asked often, and I will tell you that there has never been an outbreak that has been shown to be started in an unvaccinated population. The measles outbreak that occurred in Disneyland, all the individuals had their MMR shots. There is currently, an outbreak of mumps at the University of New Hampshire, where there were 4 confirmed cases, 2 additional, all 6 individuals were up to date on their vaccinations. So it's not individuals who are unvaccinated who are starting the outbreaks. These viruses are cyclical. They're going to be cyclical whether individuals are in a vaccine populated group or a non-vaccinated group. We see epidemiologically, if you actually look at the studies over time, that there are ebbs and flows to these vaccines or to these viruses. And again, I challenge anybody to produce research that shows that any of these outbreaks were started by an individual or a group that were unvaccinated. That has never been shown.
So if this does go forward, and the religious exemption down the line is taken away, what would be the next steps for you and your groups?
Well, I think that attorneys would be consulted. There would certainly be questioning of, what is the ability of the people of the state of Connecticut to bring about lawsuits. I think a lot of individuals are going to leave the state. That is the number one thing that I have heard from people is we're looking at other states to move to. Connecticut is currently the 2nd most exited state. Do we want to continue that trend?
Anything else you want to add that I may not have asked?
I think in talking with individuals, it really doesn't make sense what they're doing. Take hepatitis B, all right? The hepatitis B shot is given at birth in the hospital. Now, hepatitis B is contracted through sexual contact. So if mom doesn't have hepatitis, if dad didn't have hepatitis, I don't know of too many babies that are having sex. There's no reason to have a hepatitis B shot. But here's the interesting thing about it. An individual with hepatitis B, an individual with HPV is allowed to be in school. They can pass on that virus to someone else. The child who's not vaccinated cannot be in school. So my child could be sitting at lunch with somebody who is hepatitis B positive. And should this pass, the unvaccinated child would not be allowed to be there, but the child with the disease would. If this is truly about public health, which I contest it's not, then there's different changes that need to be made. If it's truly about public health, we're not looking at just vaccinating the student body. What about the teachers? What about the administrators? What about the individual that comes in to repair the copy machine, the custodial staff, the consultant who comes in for an IEP for a student who needs extra help because they're vaccine injured? If they're talking about this under the umbrella of public health, let's call a spade a spade. You're going to need to perform titers on individuals because vaccines wear off. How do you know that the English teacher who is up to date on her vaccine schedule, that it hasn't worn off and she is now a threat? What about the 10% of individuals who never developed the antibodies to the vaccine? 10% of individuals who are vaccinated will never develop the antibody to the vaccine. They may have the shot. If you do a titer later on, there are no antibodies present. They're immune to those viral contaminants that produce antibodies? Are they allowed to stay teaching? Are those children allowed to be in school? Is the state prepared to spend that kind of money to test and see? If we're going to have our teachers have to do a catch-up schedule on all 72, well, how is the state going to pay for that? Teacher health care is paid for by the state. You're going to have to get past the unions that are going to protect the teachers from being forced to do something unless it's paid for by the state. And who is it that pays for public school? We do in our property taxes. What's going to happen to property taxes? I don't think they've thought this through. This opens up a whole Pandora's box of things that the average individual says, well, this doesn't affect me, my children are grown. Yeah, it does. Because the state of New Jersey tried to put an amendment on their bill that said that you could not get your driver's license renewed unless you were up to date on your flu shot. This is much more far-reaching than what people understand. We hope during the hearings to get some of that out.
What do you say to parents who are afraid of having their child in school with someone who's not vaccinated? Like they think that they might think it's a safety risk or something like that. What do you say to those parents?
What I say to them is I ask them the question of, do they trust the vaccines? And most of which say, yeah. I said, then why are you worried if another child isn't vaccinated? I don't trust them. I don't think they're safe. I also don't think they're effective. I spent 17 years studying the effectiveness, the safety, reading every package insert of every vaccine that I could find. I have a box full of all of them. I don't feel that parents should be forced to. If they choose to, that is up to them. But if you choose to vaccinate, why wouldn't you hold confidence that your child is then safe from those who are not vaccinated? If they're really effective, you should be okay. And that's usually the answer.
All right. So he's gonna get a couple shots of us. What time does it start on Wednesday?
The hearing begins, I believe, 10 o'clock. In order to sign up to actually testify, read your testimony, I believe sign-ups start at 8 or 8:30, and I'm fairly confident there's going to be a long line. All testimony has to be submitted by 2 p.m. tomorrow in advance.
So they'll at least have a list of people that are going to testify.
Yeah.
So we'll know about how long the day will run and that sort of thing. Okay.
We're anticipating it going well into the wee hours of the night, if not midnight.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so do you have a named group that you work with? I know you just said the Chiropractors Association, but do you have?
There are multiple groups right now, and forgive me if I don't get them all or get them all correct. The Connecticut Chiropractic Council is one of the groups that are fighting this bill, this legislation. There's a group, Health Choice Connecticut. There is a Dads for Freedom group. There is, just before you asked
Sure.
me, or just before you got here, I reviewed them in my head, and of course now I
Okay.
can't remember
I
the
was
names
just
of
trying
each of
to-
them, but there's about 5 or 6 different organizations that have all come together to fight this.
Okay. All right. And
Connecticut Freedom Alliance is another one.
Okay. And so they'll have this hearing. This is still in committee, right? Or
Yes.
It's still in committee.
Still in public health, yeah.
So they'll have this hearing, and then once if it passes committee, then it'll go to the entire body for them to vote. So it's still a ways away.
Yes. But they could convene immediately following the hearing as a public health committee and vote it out of committee. It could take days or weeks, we don't know.